A secret lives inside winter stone, and tonight we listen for it. Before we drift along the quiet current of the past, if you find peace here, please leave a gentle like and subscribe so we can meet again in the next soft dream of history. You have arrived at the calm edge of your day, not hurried, not pushed, simply carried here by time. Let your shoulders loosen as if a cloak has been lifted from them. Let your jaw soften. Let the small muscles around your eyes rest. The world can keep turning without your attention for a while. In this slower hour, we step through an old doorway where wood is thick, iron is cold, and the air carries the faint scent of smoke that has lived in the grain for many winters. Picture a castle at dusk in medieval Europe. The sky is a pale slate color, and the last light lies thinly on the fields beyond the walls. The wind outside moves across frozen grass with a dry whisper, brushing the reeds along a ditch, stirring the bare twigs of hedgerows. It touches the outer stones, tests every corner, and slides along the curtain wall as if reading it with invisible fingers. High above, a few crows settle, then shift again, uneasy in the cold. Their calls are distant and brief, swallowed by the widening dark. Inside the gatehouse, the sound changes. The world becomes enclosed. Footsteps do not vanish into space. They return as a soft echo, shaped by stone. The corridor smells different too, as if damp masonry is mixed with wax and wool, with soot and the slow warmth of bodies that have passed through. The cold is not a sudden shock. It is steady, patient, as though it has been waiting. It rests in the walls, in the floor, in the heavy door itself. Even before you touch anything, you understand that the building holds the season in its bones. A servant crosses the passage with a bundle of kindling held close to the chest. The wood is split into narrow pieces that will catch quickly. Shoes make a quiet scrape on the stone flags, and the bundle gives off a clean, sharp scent, like a forest remembered. Behind the servant, another figure carries a small oil lamp. The flame is modest, and it trembles when the corridor breathes. Light moves across the wall in slow, wavering bands, revealing rough grain in the stone and pale seams of mortar, and the shadow of a hook where a torch might be set, and the dark mouth of a stairway leading upward. The castle is preparing for night. In the great hall, a long day is settling down. The last meal has been eaten without hurry. The trestle tables, made to be lifted and moved, are being cleared. Wood creaks softly as boards are raised and stacked against a wall. Bowls are carried away. A few crumbs remain, but even those will be swept up, because order is a kind of comfort. The air holds layers of smell. Bread, salted meat, a trace of ale, and underneath it, all the constant smoky sweetness of burning logs. Above, the ceiling disappears into shadow. The hall is tall, built for gatherings, for ceremonies, for the visible strength of a household. Heat rises, and it rises uselessly. It gathers near the beams, where no one sleeps, where no one eats. Down at floor level, where people sit and move and later lie down, the cold lingers like a quiet tide. The stone has held the day's chill and will not give it up quickly. Even the rushes strewn on the floor to soften footsteps cannot fully hide the hard truth beneath them. Yet, life is here, and it is gentle in its routines. A child yawns and leans against a mother's side. The mother's hand, roughened by work, smooths the child's hair with slow strokes. A dog circles twice near the hearth and lowers itself with a careful grunt, finding the faintest pocket of warmth. Two soldiers speak in low voices, their words indistinct, their tone calm, as if the cold has trained them not to waste breath. In a corner, a young servant folds a cloak and shakes out a few dried leaves that have clung to it, then folds again, careful, steady, respectful of cloth that must last. Somewhere deeper in the castle, a private chamber holds a smaller fire. The Lord's room, perhaps, or the room of a visiting guest. A servant there will tend the flames through the night, not for romance, not for drama, but for the plain need of the body to remain warm enough to rest. In that chamber, heavy bed curtains hang like dark waves of cloth. Later they will be drawn closed, making a little room inside the larger room, a shelter within stone. As dusk becomes night, the tasks become familiar. Shutters are pulled in, one by one, to cover narrow windows. They do not seal perfectly, and everyone knows it, and still they are latched, because every small reduction of wind matters. A thick door is barred. Iron meets iron with a dull sound, and the vibration travels through wood into stone. In the courtyard, snow has begun to crust where footsteps packed it earlier. It reflects a faint, cold light upward, and that light finds the edges of the surrounding walls and fades. Inside, candles are fewer now. Wax is precious. Oil is precious. Darkness is accepted, and it is softened by the glow of embers. The hall grows quieter in stages, not like a curtain dropping, but like a pond becoming still after someone has stopped walking along its shore. A cough here, a quiet laugh there, then less, then less. Somewhere, a tapestry shifts slightly, stirred by a draft moving behind it. The fabric does its patient work, trapping a thin layer of air between wool and stone, dulling the sharpness of the wall's cold. You begin to notice how the castle teaches the body. It teaches you to pay attention to warmth as a scarce thing. It teaches you that comfort is made, not given. It teaches you to move toward the fire without crowding it, to keep your hands inside your sleeves, to breathe through your nose so the air warms before it reaches your throat. It teaches you to be grateful for layers, linen against the skin, wool above it, a cloak wrapped around the shoulders, a cap pulled low. Each layer holds a little air, and that trapped air becomes a quiet ally. Now the household turns towards sleep. Not everyone will have a bed. Many will sleep in the hall on benches or on pallets of straw. A few will climb narrow stairs to small rooms where the cold is deeper, but the privacy is greater. The stone steps are worn into shallow hollows from so many feet. A hand on the wall finds it cold, even through expectation. The cold is not malicious. It is simply present, as natural as the season. For a while, we stay with the hall. Imagine the banked fire. A servant uses an iron rake to pull the coals together, then spreads them, then covers them lightly with ash. Bright red fades into a softer glow, like a lantern seen through fog. The room does not become warm, but it keeps a promise. There will be embers in the morning, a way back to flame without starting from nothing. The servants' movements are careful and quiet, because sleep will come soon, and waking others is not kindness. People choose their places. Some lie close together, sharing the small gift of body heat. Cloaks are pulled up, blankets are arranged. A bench becomes a bed. A straw pallet becomes a mattress. Breath is visible near the floor, a faint mist that appears and disappears with each slow exhale. The air feels dry near the coals and cooler farther away. The draft that comes from the doorframe is gentle but constant, like a thin stream that never stops. In this first part of our long night, we simply arrive. We feel the scale of the room, the height of the ceiling, the stubborn chill of the stone, and the humble heat of the hearth. We notice the small choices that make endurance possible: where to sleep, how to wrap a cloak, how to place a pallet away from an arrow slit, how to accept that winter will not be defeated, only managed. And as you remain here, listening to the quiet work of night, you may begin to feel your own thoughts slow down. They do not need to be forced away. They can simply settle. As dust settles when footsteps stop, the castle will hold its cold. The people inside will make their small islands of warmth. We will move with them, patiently, through the long winter dark, one calm detail at a time, until the story itself feels like a steady breath. The castle began with stone, and stone began with labor. In the hills nearby, Men cut blocks of limestone or granite, and the sound of iron on rock rang like a slow bell in cold air. Chips fell at their feet. Dust gathered in their hair. The blocks were lifted, loaded on carts, and drawn by oxen along rutted roads, wheels creaking, breath steaming from animals and men. When the blocks arrived at the building site, they were set into place with careful patience, each face trimmed, each edge fitted. Mortar was mixed, gritty and pale, and pressed into seams. Day after day, year after year, the wall grew, and the wall learned the weather. Stone is honest. It does not pretend to be warm. It absorbs heat when it can, and it releases it slowly, and in winter, it seems to remember the absence of sun. If a hand rests on a bare wall, the chill climbs into the palm, not in a sudden sting, but in a steady drawing away, as if the wall is quietly drinking warmth. In summer, that same wall would feel cool and merciful. In winter, it becomes a reservoir of cold, and the household accepts this as the price of being defended. Look softly at the windows. Many are narrow, built for protection first. Some are simple openings with a shutter. Some are tall slits made for archers, narrow outside and wider inside. They let in a strip of gray light by day, and by night they let in a thread of cold air that cannot be tied off. Even when shutters are closed, wood shifts and warps, and tiny gaps remain. A draft is always present. Not a gust, not a drama, only a thin flow that the body learns to notice on the cheek and on the back of the neck. So the people inside build warmth the way the builders built stone, layer by layer. A tapestry is more than a picture. It is a blanket for a wall. Wool hangs a little away from the masonry, trapping a quiet pocket of air, and that trapped air slows the cold. Rushes on the floor are more than decoration. They keep feet from constant contact with stone. A bench is more than a seat. It lifts a sleeping body out of the heaviest layer of cold that settles near the ground. And fire, the simplest tool, becomes a kind of gentle center. The hearth does not defeat the castle. It only offers a small place to gather. The smell of burning wood is steady, and it mixes with the smell of damp wool, of wax, of leather, and of the meal that has faded into memory. Smoke rises, sometimes finding its way out, sometimes lingering under the roof beams. It leaves a faint film on stone and cloth, a reminder that warmth costs something. As the hall settles, you may imagine the quiet internal thoughts of those who live here. Not loud thoughts, not urgent. A servant thinks about tomorrow's work, about carrying water, about splitting more wood, about the simple hope that the fire will still be alive at dawn. A mother thinks about her child's hands, whether they are tucked under the cloak, whether the cap sits well on the head. A guard thinks about the wind on the wall walk and feels grateful to be indoors for a few hours. These thoughts are simple, and they pass like slow clouds. This is the beginning of the night, the hour when people become still. Soon, the hall will hold many sleeping shapes, and the castle will sound different, more hollow, more spacious, as if it is breathing in the dark. For now, the embers glow, the drafts move, the tapestries hang, the stone holds its deep cold, and within that, the household makes its quiet arrangements, trusting small habits to carry them through. Winter darkness lasts longer than the body expects. Outside, the sun slipped away early, and it will return late. There is no bright clock on a wall, no steady hum of modern heat, only the sense of time carried in the fading of voices and the cooling of air. Many will fall into what later people might call a first sleep. Their breathing becomes slow, their shoulders soften, and the hall is filled with the quiet rhythm of many lives resting at once. Some will wake for a short while, in the middle hours, not with alarm, only with the calm familiarity of a body that knows the night is long. No one expects perfect comfort. They expect endurance, and they shape it gently. The way hands smooth a blanket, the way ash covers coals, the way a curtain is drawn so it meets just enough to block a thin seam of air. The deeper you listen, the more you understand that the castle itself is the first character in this story. It is not alive, and yet it seems to remember. It remembers every night when the fire shrank, every morning when breath turned to mist, every season when the sun could not warm stone that is 10 feet thick. Medieval builders chose stone for safety. Stone does not burn. Stone does not yield to arrows. Stone resists the slow pressure of siege. A wooden hall could be destroyed in an hour of flame. A stone keep could endure. Think of the wall as a slow-moving lake of temperature. When the sun is bright and fires are lit, a little warmth gathers in the air, but the wall drinks it in. The warmth does not stay where people sit. It moves into the stone, and the stone holds it without gratitude. Then, when night comes and the fire is banked, the wall gives back what it held, and what it held is not warmth, but the memory of cold. You can feel it without touching. Stand near the wall, and your skin senses a steady pull, as if your body is being asked to share its heat. This is why castles are difficult to heat. The very feature that makes them strong makes them stubborn. In the Great Hall, the ceiling is high, sometimes 30 feet or more. Warm air rises and gathers uselessly near the rafters. Down below, where feet and beds and benches are, cold air settles. It is heavier, and it moves along the floor in slow sheets. When a door opens, warm air slides out, and cold air slides in, not with violence, only with the quiet certainty of physics. The exchange repeats throughout the night whenever someone crosses a threshold. Windows are small, because large windows are weak points. Glass is rare, thick, uneven, and expensive. More often, there is only an opening, covered by a wooden shutter, or by oiled cloth stretched tight, or by a thin animal membrane that lets light through like a pale promise. These coverings reduce wind, but they do not seal. Wood warps, cloth tears, edges lift. Cold finds the gaps, and it does not hurry. It seeps. In towers and along outer walls, arrow slits remain open, even at night, because defense does not sleep. They are narrow outside and wider within, funnels of air that carry the outdoor chill into the inner chamber. So people hang tapestries. They are beautiful, yes, scenes of hunts and saints, and bright fields that look warmer than the room itself. But in winter, their first job is not beauty. Their first job is to place wool between flesh and stone. A tapestry hangs a few inches away from the wall, and in that space a quiet layer of air forms. Air is a poor conductor. That trapped air slows the wall's cold breath. You might stand in a room with bare stone and then step into a room with heavy hangings, and the difference feels immediate, not because the room is warm, but because the cold is less direct. Look down, slowly, at the floor. In many castles it is stone or packed earth, sometimes covered with rushes. Rushes are cut and brought in bundles. They smell faintly green when fresh, then dry to a dull straw scent. They trap dirt, and they trap a little warmth, and they soften the hardness underfoot. A rug might be placed in an important chamber. A simple mat might lie near a bed, but the cold still rises. Shoes are leather, not insulated like modern boots. Socks are wool if you are fortunate. In winter, toes grow numb first, and the numbness travels upward, reminding the body that heat is always leaking away. Corridors are colder than rooms, because corridors are not meant to be lived in. They are meant to connect. They are tunnels of stone, sometimes dim in daylight, almost black at night. A servant walks them with a candle, flame cupped in a hand. The light falls in a small circle, and beyond that circle the corridor remains itself, cold and featureless. Drafts move through these passages as if they are part of the castle's lungs. A staircase in a tower is a vertical corridor, winding, narrow, defensive. The steps are steep. The inner wall is smooth from centuries of touch. The outer wall holds the deepest cold. This is the landscape people cross at bedtime. A private chamber with a fireplace feels warmer only by comparison. The fireplace is a small mouth in the wall, lined with stone, with an iron grate or dogs to lift logs. Its heat is more focused than a central hearth, but it is still limited. The fire burns, and most of its warmth rises. The wall drinks what it can. The chimney draws smoke upward, if it draws well. In earlier castles, fireplaces are fewer, because chimneys require skill. A poor chimney smokes, and smoke makes eyes water and throats raw. So the fire must be fed carefully, and the room must be aired despite the cold. Where there is no fireplace, there is a brazier. A brazier is a metal bowl on legs, filled with coals. The coals glow like small red stones. They warm only the immediate air, a few feet around. A brazier must be watched. It can tip, it can set rushes or cloth alight. Its smoke has nowhere to go except into the room and out through cracks. Charcoal burns hotter and with less smoke than wood, but charcoal must be made, and making it takes time and controlled fire. So charcoal is precious, saved for moments when a sharper heat is needed, or when smoke would be unwelcome in an important chamber. Fuel shapes the night. A fire is not a decoration, it is a task. Wood must be hauled, stacked, kept dry. Ash must be cleared so coals can breathe. Someone must tend the fire through the hours when others sleep. In noble chambers, a young servant often sleeps nearby on a pallet. The servant's sleep is light because the servant listens, not for danger, but for the language of coals. A fire speaks in small changes. The crackle becomes quiet. The glow dims. The room's smell shifts from bright smoke to cold ash. When the servant hears these changes, the servant wakes, adds a stick, adjusts the log, keeps the fire alive. In the great hall, the fire is banked, covered with ash to preserve embers. The hall's watcher sits or dozes near the hearth, wrapped in a cloak. The hall is full of sleeping bodies, and yet it is still cold, because the volume is too large and the stone too patient. Breath rises in faint clouds and disappears. The watcher lifts the ash now and then to check the coals. If they are fading, a small stick is added. Not enough for bright flame, only enough for life. The work is quiet. Success is invisible. If the embers live, no one notices. If they die, everyone notices. All of these details, the thick walls, the small windows, the moving drafts, the careful tending of flame, lead toward one simple goal: a pocket of warmth small enough to hold. That pocket is the bed. Beds are not always private, and they are not always soft, but they are designed to lift the body away from the floor and to gather heat near skin. In a lord's chamber, a bed may be a tall frame with posts, a canopy above, and curtains on all sides. Curtains are heavy, and they overlap, making a room inside the room. Inside that fabric, breath warms the air, and warmth stays closer. Feathers help, because feathers trap air. A feather mattress is expensive, cleaned and stuffed into a tightly woven tick. Straw is more common, and straw compresses and must be refilled. Wool sits between, warmer and more durable than straw, less luxurious than feathers. Blankets are layered. Linen is against the skin, because linen takes sweat away and keeps the body drier. Wool is above, because wool holds warmth even when damp. A fur coverlet, if you have one, is a final shield. A cap on the head matters, because heat leaves through the scalp, and in a cold room even sleep cannot fully stop that loss. If the night is very long, sleep may come in two waves. People may sleep for some hours, wake quietly in the middle, then sleep again. In that waking hour, they do not rush. They may whisper a prayer. They may drink a little water from a pitcher kept near the hearth so it does not freeze. They may adjust a blanket that has slipped. They may use a chamber pot rather than crossing a corridor that feels like outdoors. Then they return to the little warm pocket they have made, and the curtains close again, and the household becomes still once more. So when you imagine medieval winter sleep, do not imagine a single moment. Imagine a system, a set of gentle habits, repeated night after night. The castle is cold by design. The people adapt by layering, by tending fire, by choosing smaller rooms in the deepest winter, by hanging fabric, by sharing beds, by accepting that warmth is local and temporary. Their endurance is not dramatic, it is steady. It is as steady as a draft through a shutter gap, as steady as the slow release of cold from stone, as steady as the quiet work of hands that keep embers alive. In a chamber, with a curtained bed, the air inside the curtains changes slowly. At first, everything is cold. The sheet feels cool. The blanket feels heavy. The space inside the curtains smells of wool and faint smoke. The sleeper shivers a little, not from fear, only from the body's ordinary attempt to make heat. After some minutes, the shiver fades. The smallest air inside the bed space warms, held in place by fabric. The canopy above stops warm breath from drifting upward into the chamber. The curtains make a boundary, and inside that boundary, the body can keep what it creates. Outside that fabric box, the room remains wide and indifferent. A fireplace might glow, and its light moves along the stones, but the room's corners stay dark. Tapestries are still. Sometimes a draft makes them lift and settle, as if the wall behind them exhales. The servant who tends the fire wakes and rises. Knees touch cold stone. An iron poker lifts ash. A log is added carefully, not too large, so it will catch and burn slow. The servant's face warms on one side, stays cold on the other. The work is repeated and familiar, almost like breathing. There is a quiet skill in this. Fire is not easy in deep winter. If a blaze dies completely, restarting it takes time. Flint strikes steel, sparks fall, tinder smolders, breath coaxes it into flame. Fingers are stiff. If the tinder is damp, it resists. So the household prefers to keep embers alive, to bank coals, to stretch heat from one day into the next. This is why ash matters. This is why the last tending before sleep is done with care. Even the act of moving through the castle becomes part of sleep. A servant carrying wood at night feels the corridor like a cold river. The lantern's light catches frost crystals on a stairwell wall, tiny bright points that vanish when the flame shifts. The sound of footsteps is louder at night because the castle is empty of daytime noise. A distant step can sound close. The castle can seem larger in darkness, not because it has grown, but because silence lets the mind notice distance. In the great hall, where many sleep, bodies cluster. A person at the edge of the group is colder. A person in the middle feels a little more protected. Dogs choose the middle too, curling near ankles, sharing warmth without asking. Children are tucked between adults, because small bodies lose heat quickly. A nurse may sleep with an infant close to the chest, because an infant cannot hold warmth alone. These arrangements are ordinary, accepted, repeated, as normal as bread and water. When morning comes, it comes gently. The first light is gray and thin. It slides through openings high in the wall and touches the stone without warming it. Breath still shows in the air. A shutter is unlatched, wood creaking, and the draft changes direction, bringing in a different cold, a daytime cold. The fire is uncovered, the embers are stirred, and small flames begin again. The castle does not become warm, but life begins to move, and movement itself makes the cold easier to bear. This second part rests on one simple thought. Winter in a castle is not a single problem with a single solution. It is many small problems and many small solutions. Stone holds cold, so people add fabric. Air moves, so people overlap curtains. Heat rises, so people sleep elevated. Fire fades, so someone wakes to feed it. In these quiet adjustments, a harsh season becomes livable and sleep becomes possible. Listen to the chimney. It draws with a small sigh, pulling smoke upward. Then it rests. When wind stirs, the draft wavers and the fire answers with softer crackle. In the middle of winter, warmth is not a room. It is a ritual. Evening in the castle is a slow closing of many small things. It begins while there is still a faint line of light in the high windows, a thin silver that makes the stone look almost blue. Servants move without urgency, because urgency wastes breath and makes hands clumsy. They carry buckets, sweep crumbs, fold cloth, stack benches, and check the latches that will matter when the night grows deeper. The air feels drier near the hearth and slightly damp near the outer walls, as if the castle has different climates within a single body. Somewhere beyond the hall, the courtyard lies open to the sky. Snow gathers in the corners, where the wind cannot lift it. The white surface reflects moonlight back up into the arches and galleries, and that pale light seeps inward through door cracks and window gaps, reminding everyone that cold is waiting just beyond the stone. When a door opens, even for a moment, the corridor exhales a chill that feels like stepping outside. It slides around ankles first, then climbs the legs, then settles in the lower belly, and it makes the shoulders rise as if to protect the throat. So the household prepares the night like a careful craft. In a chamber with a fireplace, the last tending is done with quiet respect. A log is chosen for its thickness, for the way it will burn slowly rather than flare. The servant lays it across the coals, not too close to the edge of the hearth, not too far back where it would smoke. The iron poker makes a soft scrape. Sparks rise in brief orange threads and vanish. The smell becomes brighter for a moment, fresh sap and charred bark. Then the fire steadies again, as if it has accepted its role. In rooms without fireplaces, the brazier is checked. The metal bowl is heavy and dark, warmed only at its core where coals glow. A servant lifts the lid, if there is one, and looks at the red heart inside. If the coals are too lively, they can be dangerous near fabric. If they are too dull, they will be useless before midnight. The servant adjusts them with tongs, adds a small scoop of charcoal, then steps back and watches for a minute, listening for the tiny crackle that says the fuel has caught. The brazier is placed with care, far from curtains and wool, close enough to make a small circle of gentler air. Then there are the windows. Shutters are pulled closed, hinges groaning softly. A hand runs along the edge, feeling for a gap where wind could enter. If the gap is wide, a strip of cloth is pressed into it, a simple seal made from old linen, from wool that has seen too many seasons. In some households, a bundle of dried herbs is tucked into a window recess, not only for scent, but to discourage insects that would gladly eat through fabric while everyone sleeps. Lavender, wormwood, rosemary. Their fragrance is faint in the cold, but it gives the mind something clean to notice. The walls are another concern. If a tapestry has slipped, it is rehung, not because beauty requires it, but because the air behind the tapestry must be trapped again. The cloth is heavy. It takes two people to lift the upper edge onto its iron hooks. When it settles, it releases a small puff of dust and soot. The figures woven into it, hunters and hounds, saints and lions, look calmer in the low firelight, as if they have been waiting all day for night to return. Now, the bed becomes the center of intention. In a noble chamber, the bed is high, its frame thick with oak, its posts rising like quiet pillars. A step-stool stands beside it. The mattress is a layered thing, perhaps straw beneath for shape and feather above for softness. The feather tick, tightly woven, holds the down inside like captured air. On top, linen sheets are spread, cool to the touch, smelling faintly of lye from washing, faintly of sun if they were aired in daylight. In winter, even clean linen can feel severe at first, a cold smoothness that makes the skin want to retreat. Wool blankets are folded and shaken out. Wool has a particular scent, lanolin and smoke, and the simple closeness of sheep. When the blanket is lifted, it releases the smell of the last night, of breath and embers. It is not unpleasant. It is familiar. A fur coverlet, if the household owns one, lies on top like a quiet animal at rest. Bear, wolf, sheep, whatever the land and fortune provided, the fur holds air in its dense hairs. It makes a soft barrier that drafts cannot easily cross. And then there are the curtains. Thick panels hang from the canopy frame. They are drawn, tested, pulled back, tied, and then released again, as if someone is practicing a gesture that must be done correctly in darkness. The overlap matters. A small gap becomes a cold seam, and the cold seam becomes a wakeful mind. So the curtains are taught to meet. They fall into place with a soft sigh of fabric. In the hall, the preparations are simpler, but no less meaningful. Pallets are laid out on the floor. Straw is stuffed into sacks of coarse cloth. The sacks are thin, but they soften the stone and lift the body a little. Benches become beds for those who are permitted that comfort. Cloaks are folded into pillows. Caps are kept close, because heads grow cold quickly. A mother checks a child's ears, tucks them under a hood. A soldier loosens his belt, but keeps his tunic on. No one undresses fully. The cold would punish bare skin too quickly, and the effort of dressing again in the morning would be worse than keeping layers on. Clothing for sleep is not special. It is practical. Linen against the skin, a wool tunic above, hose on the legs, socks if there are socks, sometimes soft shoes if the floor is cruel. A cloak is wrapped around the shoulders and pulled across the chest. For those with better cloth, there may be a second layer, a gown, a sleeved overgarment that traps more air. A cap is pulled down. Some caps have flaps that cover the ears. The head, in winter, is a doorway where heat likes to leave. The cap is a quiet gate that closes that door. There is also the small matter of water. A pitcher is placed near the hearth so it will not freeze. A basin is set for morning washing. In a cold room, even water becomes a fragile thing. If it is left too far from heat, it becomes ice by dawn. Wine is safer than water, but even wine can grow slushy in the harshest nights. So the pitcher sits where warmth is closest, as if listening to the fire. Chamber pots are set within reach. No one wants to cross a corridor at midnight. The corridor feels like an outdoor path, dark and hard and unkind. A pot is an unglamorous mercy. It saves heat, saves time, saves risk. It is part of the night, as ordinary as ash and wool. Finally, the castle turns its voice down. Candles are pinched out. Oil lamps are covered. Only a few lights remain, enough for a watcher to move, enough for a servant to find the hearth. The sound of the hall becomes larger as voices fade. The crackle of the banked coals becomes noticeable. A far door creaks, then settles. A gust outside presses against shutters, and the shutters answer with a dull rattle. The wind finds an arrow slit and sings a thin note that moves through the stone like a distant flute. This is the moment when you may feel yourself settling too. Not asleep, not yet, simply heavier, as if your body is remembering that it can be held by gravity. In the castle, people lie down. They pull coverings up. They tuck hands into sleeves. They turn their faces away from drafts. The first minutes are always the hardest because everything is cold. The sheet is cold. The blanket is cold. The air near the pillow is cold. The body responds with a brief shiver, a quiet tremor that makes heat from within. Then, slowly, warmth begins to gather, not in the room, but around the body. A cloak warms where it touches skin. Wool holds the heat, keeps it from leaving too quickly. In a curtained bed, the air inside the curtains starts to change. Breath warms it a little. Two bodies warm it more. The canopy keeps that warm air from escaping upward into the chamber. A small, private climate forms, barely larger than the bed itself. Outside the curtains, the servant listens. The fire speaks in sighs and crackles. The servant keeps one ear open for the sound of the coals collapsing, for the hush that means the flames have died too far. The servant has learned to sleep in pieces. The body rests, but the attention remains, like a candle turned low rather than extinguished. In the hall, the watcher near the hearth does the same. He dozes, then stirs, then dozes again. He feels the heat on his cheek and the cold on his back. He adjusts his cloak. He looks at the embers. If they are fading, he adds a twig, then covers it again. The goal is not flame, but life. The embers must survive until morning, like a small red memory of warmth. So part 3 is not a single scene, but a gentle sequence of small acts. Shutters closed, cloth pressed into gaps, tapestries straightened, fires fed, beds made into shelters, bodies wrapped into layers, darkness accepted. And through all of it, the castle remains what it is: stone, patient and cold, offering safety in exchange for endurance. As you stay with these details, notice how nothing is rushed. The night is long. The people have learned that speed does not make winter shorter, only steadiness does. Only the quiet repetition of the same careful actions, night after night, until even the cold feels familiar, and sleep can arrive like a slow tide, touching the edge of thought, then rising, then holding you without struggle. Before sleep fully takes a person, there is often a short time of waking that feels different from day. In that time, the mind is softer. It drifts over simple facts: the shadow of a bedpost, the faint beginning of frost at a shutter edge, the dark stain of smoke above the hearth. A noble might think of the day without tension, of messages received and bread shared, and feel grateful, in a quiet way, that stone walls still stand between the household and the storm. In the bed, warmth begins almost politely. The body offers heat. The bedding accepts it. Feathers shift with a soft whisper. Straw, if it lies beneath, makes a faint rustle, as if the bed is breathing. Linen, once sharp with cold, becomes neutral, then slightly warm, and that small change loosens the jaw and shoulders. Sometimes, before the curtains are fully closed, someone touches the fabric to feel its chill. The outer side holds the cold of stone. The inner side warms quickly when it is near skin. When the curtains meet, sound becomes smaller. The room outside still exists, but it feels farther away, wrapped behind wool. In the great hall, people build shelter in other ways. They turn their faces toward a friend, pull a cloak over the head, and leave a small opening for air. They place spare clothing beside the body to block a draft. They learn to sleep with nearby breathing, with straw shifting, with the soft clink of a buckle as someone settles. These sounds are not alarming. They become part of the night, like the steady glow of banked coals. A servant on night duty crosses corridors many times. The candle flame leans away from drafts and straightens in still patches. The corridor smells of damp stone and old mortar, sometimes of stored herbs pressed into niches. The cold there feels sharper in the nose. Footsteps echo, then fade, then echo again as a doorway is passed. The servant does not pause. Pausing would only let the cold deepen. At the hearth, the work is done with practiced hands. A small log is added. Coals are stirred. Ash is shifted aside so air can reach what still glows. The servant knows, without measuring, how long the fire will last. That knowledge lives in the body, in memory, in the feel of heat on the face and cold on the back. Outside, snow rests on the roof and does not melt. If guards walk the walls, their boots scrape ice. Their breath rises pale and is carried away. Deep inside, stone keeps its winter memory. A fire can brighten a room, but it cannot persuade the wall to forget. So fabric is hung, gaps are stuffed, and warmth is made smaller and closer. The night continues, and waking thoughts grow thin. Breath becomes slower. The sensation of cold remains, but it is no longer urgent. It is simply a background, like distant wind. In that gentle background, the pocket of warmth becomes enough, and sleep arrives as a slow tide, touching the edge of thought, then rising, then holding you without struggle. In some chambers, folded tapestries and storage chests are layered with sprigs of lavender or wormwood. The scent is faint, but it lingers when the lid is lifted, a dry sweetness mixed with cedar. It is a small defense against moth and damp, and also a quiet reminder that even in winter, the household still tends to the slow passage of time. Even the simplest care, repeated, becomes a kind of warmth that lives in memory longer than the firelight. For a while, yes, the castle night does not end when the first sleep begins. It simply changes its pace. In the hours after the household settles, the building grows quieter in a way that feels almost physical. During the day, sound is scattered by work, footsteps, voices, the clatter of dishes, the scrape of chairs, the ring of metal tools. At night, those sounds fall away, and what remains can be heard at a distance. A cough from a far chamber, the soft thud of a log shifting on the coals, the slow drip of melted frost in a corner where stone meets wood. Even the wind outside becomes more audible, because there is so little inside to compete with it. If you stand, in imagination, near an exterior wall, you can sense the cold as a steady presence. It does not rush, it does not shout, it simply leans inward, patient and consistent. The tapestry between you and the stone is like a curtain of time, slowing that pressure. Yet behind it, air is moving. On certain nights, when the wind finds a crack in mortar, the tapestry stirs with a gentle ripple, as if someone invisible has brushed past. The motion is small, but it is enough to remind the body to pull a cloak closer, to tuck a hand into a sleeve, to keep warmth from leaking away. First, sleep comes in waves. In the hall, many drift off quickly from exhaustion, their bodies heavy from work and from the simple challenge of staying warm. In a private bed, sleep arrives more slowly, because the mind has more space to wander. Behind curtains, a person listens to the fire and to the distant noises of the castle settling. They feel the warmth that has finally gathered inside the bed space. They notice the dampness in the breath, the slight softness in the curtain fabric where it has absorbed moisture. Then the thoughts loosen, the breath slows. The body becomes less alert to the cold, not because the cold has gone, but because attention has softened. Then, sometime in the deep middle of the night, waking comes without alarm. It is not a sudden return to full daylight thinking. It is a gentle surfacing, like a swimmer rising into cooler air. Many people in medieval winters experienced this naturally. The long darkness invited it. The body slept, then woke, then slept again, without anyone calling it a problem. It was simply the shape of the night. A person wakes and listens. Inside the curtained bed, it is very dark. The room beyond the curtains is darker still, but it feels wider, colder, full of stone. The person may not move at first. They may only breathe and notice that the bed is warm now, truly warm compared to the chamber. That warmth makes it tempting to stay still. Yet the waking mind has its own small needs: a dry throat, the desire to shift, the need to use the chamber pot, the wish to check on a child sleeping in the same room. If there is a cup or pitcher within reach, it is used carefully. The rim is cold, the liquid colder, but the act of drinking is soothing. If the person must reach for a chamber pot, they do so slowly, trying to keep as much of the body under blankets as possible. This is a quiet negotiation with cold. Hands emerge, work briefly, then return to warmth. Every movement is made with economy, as if the body has learned that wasteful motion invites discomfort. Sometimes, The waking hour is used for prayer. Not dramatic prayer, not urgent, but steady words said into the darkness. A whispered pattern learned in childhood. Gratitude for shelter. A request for protection. A thought for those outside the walls. Travelers, shepherds, soldiers on watch. Prayer is also a way of measuring time. It gives the mind something gentle to hold while the night is long. In some beds, quiet conversation happens. A few soft sentences between two people who share warmth and habit. The words are not important. The sound itself is comforting, a small proof of life in the dark. Then silence returns. The shared breath settles into a slow rhythm again. Outside the curtained bed, other lives are moving. A servant rises from a pallet near the hearth. The servant's feet meet stone, and the stone takes heat immediately. The servant pulls a cloak tighter and moves toward the fire. The glow is dim, but it is enough to see the edge of ash and the faint red beneath. The servant kneels, feeling cold through fabric at the knees, and uses the poker to open the coals. A small flare of orange appears, then fades. A thin stick is added. A log, chosen earlier for slow burning, is settled into place. This work is done almost without thought, but not without care. A fire that dies too far cannot be brought back quickly. Flint, steel, tinder, all are possible. Yet the process is slow, and in the cold, fingers become stubborn. So the servant guards the living ember as if it were a fragile seed. In the hall, the watcher does something similar. The banked coals are lifted, stirred, then covered again. The watcher's eyes are half closed from tiredness. The warmth on the face is pleasant. The cold on the back is constant. The body learns to accept both at once. Somewhere nearby, a dog lifts its head, then lowers it again, trusting the familiar routine. The corridors between these warm points remain cold. They are the true winter of the castle, the spaces that do not pretend to comfort anyone. When a servant carries wood through them, the sound of footsteps becomes a kind of clock. Each step echoes, then disappears into stone. The lantern flame trembles. The air smells of dampness and old smoke. A hand on a door latch touches metal that feels almost biting. The servant opens the door only as wide as necessary, slips through, closes it again quickly, as if closing out an ocean. These movements happen again and again. They are part of the night's hidden labor. The household sleeps, and the household is kept sleeping by those who wake. As the hours pass, the cold deepens toward its lowest point. This usually happens in the time before dawn, when the world has been without sun for the longest. Outside, the sky is still black. Inside, the fires are at their smallest. The stone has released whatever little warmth it held from day. The air in the chamber may reach the point where breath becomes visible even near the bed. In the hall, clouds of breath hover above clustered sleepers like faint mist. Frost begins to gather where moisture meets cold surface. Along the inside of a shutter, a thin white fringe appears. On the edges of metal tools, a dusting of crystals forms. On the outer sections of bed curtains, where the fabric is closest to an exterior wall, dampness stiffens, then turns slightly crunchy with ice. These details are noticed only in passing, because no one wants to look too closely at the cold. They simply endure it. Second sleep comes when it comes. After the waking hour, the mind becomes less active. The body, warmed by the bed and tired from the effort of simply existing in winter, surrenders again. Dreams arrive in a softer way. Sometimes they are vivid, full of summer light and open fields, as if the mind is offering itself a remembered warmth. Sometimes they are simple and fragmentary, a sound, a face, a taste of bread. Sometimes they are uneasy, shaped by wind noises that the sleeping mind turns into distant voices. If you have ever listened to rain on a roof, you know how the mind can drift with repetitive sound. Here it is wind, here it is the small crackle of coals, Here it is the slow rhythm of many sleepers in one place. The castle becomes a kind of instrument, stone and wood and fabric responding to weather. In that instrument, sleep is the quiet note repeated. Eventually, very gradually, the darkness begins to change, not to lighten quickly, but to thin at the edges. A high window, even if shuttered, seems less black. The air feels slightly different, not warmer, but less heavy. In the hall, someone stirs. In a chamber, a servant wakes earlier than the rest and begins to rebuild the fire with more intent. Ash is pushed aside, kindling is laid. Breath is blown gently onto the tinder of coals. A small flame appears and is protected, fed, encouraged. Morning, in a castle, is not a sunrise of warmth. It is simply the moment when work starts again. Shutters are opened for light, and the light reveals what the night has done. Frost on tapestry edges, ice patterns on any glass that exists, a pitcher with a skin of ice on top, cracked when a hand touches it. Stone that looks the same as it did at midnight, indifferent and calm. Leaving the bed is always a small act of courage. Inside the curtains, the air is warm and damp from breath. Outside, the chamber is sharp. The person moves quickly. Feet find shoes or thick socks. A cloak is pulled on at once. Clothing laid near the hearth feels slightly less cold, and that small mercy matters. The first breath in the open room feels like cold water in the lungs, clean and startling. In the hall, people roll up pallets, shake straw, fold blankets. They move toward the hearth, where the fire is now brighter. Faces are pale in the weak light, cheeks reddened by cold. The smell of smoke grows stronger as the fire wakes. Soon the smell of food joins it, porridge and bread, a simple heat that warms from the inside. So the night has done its work, and the day begins again. Yet the memory of the night remains in every surface, in every stiff curtain edge, in every cold wall behind fabric. The pattern will repeat when darkness returns. But for now, there is the steady comfort of routine. Fire rebuilt, hands busy, voices low, and the knowledge that another winter morning has arrived within the shelter of stone. Between first and second sleep, some people step briefly out of their beds. This happens more often in chambers than in the hall, because a chamber has a door that can be closed, and because a chamber pot is close enough to reach without crossing a room full of strangers. Even so, rising is unpleasant. The moment a person lifts a blanket, cold air slides in as if it has been waiting. The skin tightens. A person moves with care, keeping the head covered, keeping the shoulders wrapped. If the person opens the bed curtains, the chamber appears in fragments, a faint red from the hearth, a pale shape of furniture, a glimmer of iron on a hook. The rest is shadow. The air smells of smoke and wool, and underneath that, the faint sourness of damp stone. The floor is a dark plain that feels colder just to look at. Feet find a rug or rushes, if the room is fortunate, but even rushes hold cold. After a brief task, the person returns to the bed quickly, as if returning to shore after stepping into icy water. The blankets fall back into place. The curtains are drawn. Warmth slowly fills the small space again. This repeated leaving and returning teaches the body a quiet lesson. Comfort is made, not given. For servants, the waking hour is not optional. A servant may wake because the fire calls for attention, because a bell has sounded, because an infant has cried, or simply because cold has pushed sleep away. Servants learn to move silently. They lift the poker without clanging it. They place wood with practiced gentleness. They keep their breath quiet when they pass a sleeping bench, because even breath can be loud in a still corridor. The castle has its own night sounds that are not human. Wood beams contract in the cold and release with a soft pop. A gust presses against a door and the iron strap answers with a faint creak. Snow slides from a roof edge in a hush that might be mistaken for a whisper. In a tower stair, air moves like water, rising or sinking. and the movement makes a low draft that can be felt against the cheek. In the deepest part of night, the mind becomes more sensitive to these small cues. A sleeper half wakes and thinks they heard footsteps when it was only wind. Another thinks they heard voices when it was only the hearth settling. The castle is not haunted in a dramatic way. It is simply alive, with the ordinary noises of a large building meeting winter, and the human mind, softened by sleep, gives those noises gentle meanings. When dawn finally approaches, there is relief that is more physical than emotional. The body has held its warmth through the hardest hours. The fires have survived. The thought of movement and daylight feels easier than the long stillness of the night. So part 4 holds this quiet truth. Medieval sleep is not one unbroken line, but a pair of rests separated by a small waking island. In that island, people drink, pray, tend, listen, and then return to warmth. And the castle, steady and patient, receives their sleep and gives back in the morning. The same calm stone and the same cold air, softened only by the small, faithful flame. Somewhere, a single ember holds, quiet and red, like a small promise that the night will be kind to you. In the heart of winter, when daylight feels like a brief visitor, and dusk returns before anyone has truly finished the day, the castle begins to change the way it is used. It is not a sudden change. It is a quiet narrowing, a slow folding inward, as if the household is drawing its cloak closer around its own shoulders. The great stone rooms remain what they have always been, broad and tall, obedient to the needs of defense. Yet the people living inside them learn, year after year, that survival is not only about walls and watchmen. It is also about where you place a bed, how you close a door, how you keep a fire alive, and how you make the cold feel less personal. A household that has endured many winters does not try to heat everything. They have learned through long practice that heat is a shy thing in a fortress. It gathers only where it is invited, and it slips away the moment it is neglected. So, as autumn hardens into the first frosts, servants begin to move objects with a calm, practiced patience. A chest that stood in a bright summer chamber is carried down a corridor to a room that sits deeper within the keep. A bench is dragged closer to a hearth in a smaller hall. A blanket that once lay folded as decoration is brought out and counted as protection. You can hear the castle speak through these preparations. Wood scrapes softly on stone. Rope creaks as a bundle is lifted. Iron rings give a faint clink as bed curtains are tested on their rails. Every sound is answered by an echo that returns slower than expected, as if the corridor is thinking about what it has heard. The air itself feels different during these days, as if it is learning new paths. A door opens, and for a moment a cold passage exhales into a room. Then the door closes again, and the room gathers itself, holding on to the small warmth it has earned. The choice of winter rooms is practical and familiar, the way a well-used prayer is familiar. In some castles, the household draws nearer to the kitchen. The kitchen hearth is a steady animal that must be fed, no matter the season. It cannot be allowed to die completely, because the morning meal depends upon it, and because a fire that lives through the night is easier to wake again at dawn. Near the kitchen, the air carries rich, quiet scents. Wood smoke, yes, but also grain warmed into porridge, the faint sweetness of ale, onion skins and herbs bruised on a board, and the clean bite of salt from stored meat. In other castles, winter life settles lower, closer to the earth. Rooms that are partly sheltered by ground do not swing as wildly in temperature as high towers exposed to wind. The earth, steady and slow, lends a kind of mute protection. These lower spaces may smell of stored things, dried beans in sacks, apples laid in straw, salt fish in barrels, leather straps, old wood, dust that has settled for months. It is not a pleasant smell in the way a flower is pleasant, but it is a familiar one. It is the scent of a household that has prepared. It says, quietly, There will be something to eat when the world outside is hard. Some households, especially those with animals sheltered within the outer walls, know another kind of winter advantage. A stable is not a clean place, yet it is warm in its own way. Horses breathe steadily through the dark, the sound like soft bellows. Cattle shift their weight and let out a low, sleepy note. Pigs settle into straw with faint grunts that fade into silence. The heat of their bodies rises slowly, and above them, rooms can feel just slightly less severe. It is a compromise medieval people accept without needing to name it. Warmth comes with smell. Comfort comes with labor. Most things come mixed. As rooms are chosen, other rooms are allowed to fall silent. Doors are shut. Shutters are fastened. In an unoccupied chamber, the cold has no opponent. Water left in a jug freezes solid. Frost thickens in corners where the wall meets the floor. The air becomes so still that even a footstep seems too loud, as if it would disturb something sleeping. Yet these unused rooms are not abandoned out of fear. They are abandoned out of wisdom. There is no sense wasting fuel and labor trying to warm emptiness. A castle is large, but firewood is not endless, and neither is the strength of the people who carry it. This narrowing changes the rhythm of the household. In warmer months, the people may spread out like light across many spaces. In winter, they gather. They talk more closely. They share more often. A small room with a fire becomes a center, and the rest of the castle becomes a dark ring around it. If you listen, you can hear the winter castle breathing through routine. The same stair stones are climbed again and again. The same corridor echoes with the same careful footsteps. The same latch clicks softly, then is heard again, then again, until the sound becomes as ordinary as a heartbeat. In the great hall, where sheer volume defeats warmth, some castles create smaller islands inside the larger space. Wooden screens are brought out and set to divide the hall. Heavy fabric hangings become temporary walls, turning a corner of the hall into a chamber-like enclosure. Within that smaller space, the fire feels closer and the air feels less wasted. It also changes sound. Voices become less echoing. The crackle of a hearth seems nearer. Even the quiet sigh of someone settling onto a bench becomes a sound with shape, contained and gentle, rather than lost in vastness. Fabric becomes a winter ally everywhere. Rugs are laid on cold floors where they can be spared. Rushes are renewed, shaken out, spread thickly, then sprinkled with herbs that release a mild scent when crushed underfoot. Lavender, if it can be afforded, soft and clean. Wormwood, sharp and bitter, to discourage insects. Rosemary, if the kitchen garden has kept some life. These are small comforts, and they do not defeat the cold, but they soften the world. They give the mind something gentle to notice, while the body does what it must. Tapestries are rehung, checked, and overlapped where walls meet. A tapestry is more than an image. It is a layer of trapped air. It is a soft barrier between human skin and stone memory. When the wind presses hard outside, a tapestry may move with a slow ripple, and that movement is a delicate warning that the castle is never truly sealed. Yet the fabric breaks the force of drafts into something calmer, less direct. The cold arrives as a murmur instead of a shout. The heavy wool absorbs sound as well, so that a room wrapped in cloth feels quieter, and quiet itself becomes a kind of warmth. Even the care of these hangings is part of winter routine. On a mild day, if sun appears for an hour, a servant may carry a smaller cloth outside and beat it gently to loosen dust and soot. Smoke clings to everything in winter, a fine residue that darkens thread and dulls color. The cloth is shaken and aired, then brought back inside before damp can settle. Moths are watched for, and herbs are tucked into folds when textiles are stored. The household learns to protect warmth and cloth at the same time, because both are precious and both are easily lost. The bed is adjusted like a tool, because in winter, the bed is not only a place of rest, it is a shelter. It is moved away from windows and arrow slits, away from doors that open often, away from the most exposed walls. Bed curtains are repaired because a loose seam is a path for cold. Rings are oiled so they slide without a harsh scrape. A canopy is checked because warm air rises, and a canopy keeps that warm air close. Straw pallets are shaken and refilled. Feather mattresses are beaten and fluffed, redistributing the precious filling so it will trap air evenly. Clothing is arranged with the same patient care. In the evening, garments for mourning are placed near the fire, not to become truly warm, but to become less cruelly cold. A cap is set within reach. A cloak is folded so it can be wrapped quickly when someone rises from bed. Footwear is placed where it can be found without searching. No one wants to stand barefoot on stone while fumbling in darkness. A small jug may be set near the hearth so it will not freeze hard, and a cup may be left beside it, a modest mercy for a dry mouth in the night. And while all these preparations occur, the castle itself keeps doing what it has always done. It holds cold in its mass. It pulls warmth from air and body. It lets drafts find the smallest seams. Medieval people do not mistake preparation for victory. They are not trying to create a summer night in January. They are trying to create something sufficient, a pocket of tolerable air, a slow, steady fire, a bed that can become a small room within a room, a routine that keeps worry from growing too loud. As the hour of sleep approaches, preparations settle into ritual. Exterior doors are barred, shutters are closed and latched, curtains are drawn over openings where they can be drawn. If a draft is felt, a rag is pressed into the gap, or a twist of straw is wedged into a seam, the goal is not perfection. The goal is less. Less wind, less sharpness, less of that constant stealing that takes warmth from a room one breath at a time. In chambers where a fireplace is allowed, a final log is chosen carefully, the sort that burns slowly and leaves deep coals. The servant tending it knows the weight of wood in the hand, the sound of it when it is set on embers, the way the flame takes or refuses. In rooms without fireplaces, brazier coals are arranged so they will glow longer, and the brazier is placed with respect for its danger, not too near cloth, not too far from where its faint warmth might be useful. Fire is always both gift and threat, and winter makes everyone remember that. Lights are reduced, candles are pinched out to conserve wax. The dark takes its place, gently and completely. Only a few small lights remain, only where duty requires them. The sounds of the castle simplify. Voices become fewer. Footsteps become softer. The smell of smoke grows calmer as the fires settle. Somewhere in the distance, perhaps the kitchen hearth gives a low crackle, like a quiet animal shifting in sleep. In some households, a short prayer is spoken before the last light fades. It may be the Lord's voice, or the lady's, or an older servant who has learned the words by heart. The prayer is not hurried. It moves like warm breath in cold air. It asks for protection through darkness, for health through the long months, for peace in rooms where many bodies will lie close together. Children listen, sometimes solemn, sometimes distracted by the fire's soft movement, yet even distraction is gentle. Practical things are set in place without fuss. A chamber pot is placed where it can be reached without crossing a freezing floor. A pitcher is set near the hearth so the water will not turn to hard ice. A small bundle of kindling is stacked near the fireplace. A poker is leaned where it can be found by touch. The servant assigned to the fire learns the room in darkness, counting steps from pallet to hearth, from hearth to door, so no stumbling is needed. Outside the winter rooms, the castle becomes a wider silence. Corridors stand empty and cold. A lantern makes a small circle of amber light, and within that circle frost on stone may sparkle faintly. The guard's breath clouds, then vanishes. Keys chime softly at a belt. The circle moves on, and the corridor returns to darkness. as if it has closed its eyes again. Inside the chosen rooms, people arrange themselves as they always do. Some sleep on benches, lifted above the lowest layer of cold air. Some sleep on straw pallets, thin but familiar, the straw slightly sweet and dusty beneath linen. Those of higher status retreat behind bed curtains that create a room within a room. Those of lower status share blankets, or share warmth simply by lying close enough that breath and body heat mingle. Sometimes a small dog curls near feet, grateful for the company, adding its quiet warmth without any demand. When someone finally settles into bed, the first touch of linen is cool, almost startling, but not for long. Wool blankets follow, heavy and patient. A cloak may be kept on, wrapped across the chest. The body shivers briefly, makes its own heat, then becomes still. Curtains overlap carefully so no narrow seam remains. Inside that small enclosure, the air begins to change, becoming less like the room and more like a private pocket of breath. Beyond the fabric, the wind may worry, the shutters, and the castle answers with a low creak that comes and goes. Smoke scent lingers in cloth, softened by herbs in the rushes. In that dim pocket, the mind slows, letting the night feel long and safely unhurried. Even thoughts settle down, one by one, quiet. Night in a medieval castle does not arrive as a single solid block. It arrives in layers, like blankets placed one after another, each one heavier, each one quieter. At first, there is the evening hour, when people are still awake, speaking softly, listening to the fire, feeling the cold at the edges of the room and the warmth in the center. Then there is the first descent into sleep, when bodies finally give up their efforts and let the day dissolve. Much later, there is a second descent, after a waking interval that feels natural in the long winter dark. In the first sleep, the castle seems to settle. The wind outside still moves, but it becomes a distant voice. The fire makes its own small conversation. A crackle, a shift, an occasional sigh as a log collapses inward and sends a brief pulse of light across bed curtains. In the dark, above a canopy, warm air lingers like a hidden pocket. Beneath the bed, the lowest air stays colder, heavy as water. Even in sleep, the body senses these layers. It curls a little tighter. It draws the blanket toward the throat. It finds a shape that wastes as little warmth as possible. For a time, the mind drifts where it will. Dreams come softly, often colored by the day's work, by the sound of a hammer earlier, by the smell of bread, by a brief argument, by a face seen in a corridor. In winter, dreams may borrow the cold itself, a dream of walking on a road under bare trees, a dream of a river with ice along its banks, a dream of breath turning white in moonlight. These dreams are not always bright or dark. They are simply the mind's way of folding the season into images, the way cloth folds into a chest when the year turns. Then, somewhere deep in the night, many people wake. It is not an alarm. It is more like a tide turning. The body has slept enough to restore itself a little, and now it floats closer to the surface. Eyes open in darkness. A hand reaches out and touches linen, wool, the edge of a curtain. The room is quiet, but not completely. The fire may still glow in the hearth. If you listen, you can hear it breathing, a faint tick and whisper of ember. Outside, wind may brush the shutters, making them creak once, then fall silent again. Somewhere in the castle, a guard's steps pass, measured and patient, each footfall a small confirmation that the walls are still watched. This waking interval has calm purpose. In winter, a fire ignored is a fire that dies, and a dead fire is a hardship that repeats itself in the morning. So someone tends it. A servant slips out from a pallet and moves carefully, knowing the floor by memory. In the faint glow, the servant's hands are pale and steady. The poker enters the ash with a quiet scrape. Coals are nudged together, as if they are being gathered for comfort. A small stick is laid on top. Then, Another. The embers brighten, like eyes opening. For a moment, warmth touches the fingers, and the servant stands still and lets that warmth be felt, then withdraws and returns to the pallet. The whole action is done quietly, almost reverently, as if the fire is a sleeping creature that must not be startled. Others wake for simpler reasons. A shoulder aches from one position. A foot has grown numb. The blankets have shifted, and the air at the edge of the bed feels too sharp. A person turns, pulling wool closer, smoothing linen, finding a better shape for the body. Someone reaches for the chamber pot, moving slowly so the cold floor is crossed as little as possible. Another takes a sip of water or ale, the liquid cool in the mouth, but welcome. A mother adjusts a child's cover, tucking it in with a touch that is careful and slow, as if the touch itself is a blanket. In these hours, prayer often appears, not as a performance, but as a steady rope to hold. Words learned long ago are whispered or simply repeated in the mind. The rhythm is comforting. It keeps fear from growing in the dark. It makes the night feel like something that can be named and understood. For some, prayer is a habit as natural as breathing. For others, it is a careful choice made in a moment of wakefulness, a reminder that even if the room is cold, the heart can be calm. This middle waking is also a time for small human closeness. A couple behind bed curtains may turn toward each other and speak in low voices, muffled by fabric and wool. They may share warmth under a blanket. They may speak of nothing important at all, only a remark about the wind, a memory of summer, a quiet plan for a task tomorrow. The words are soft and slow. They do not aim to excite. They simply exist, like the steady glow of coals. Even a few servants, sharing a corner near the hearth, may exchange a brief sentence, then fall silent again, letting the sound of the fire fill what remains. If there is spinning to be done, a woman might take advantage of this wakeful hour. By the faint light of the embers or a small lamp, her fingers can twist wool into thread with practiced ease. The motion is repetitive and soothing, the spindle turning and turning, a tiny orbit of work in the quiet. A man might mend a strap or check a buckle by touch. A guard might pause to warm hands, then continue along the wall. Work in the night is rarely loud. It is small, careful, and respectful of those sleeping nearby. Above all of it, the castle's sounds continue. In a passage, a draft slides along the floor like a slow animal, seeking an opening. Mortar seams breathe a little. A shutter flexes as wind presses, then relaxes. Somewhere, water in a bucket forms a thin skin of ice that cracks when the bucket is nudged. In a tower, the air may be so cold that a pale bloom of frost appears on an inner wall, delicate as lace. In the morning, it will vanish. For now, it is a quiet sign of how winter holds even stone in its attention. Sound changes at night. A cough is loud. A whispered word seems to travel farther than it should. The smallest creak feels like a message. Yet the castle also holds sound in its soft layers. Tapestries drink it. Bed curtains drink it. Straw and wool drink it. The winter rooms become muffled nests inside the larger hard shell. When someone turns in bed, the noise is more like a gentle rustle than a sharp disruption. When a log shifts, it is heard, and then it is forgotten. Outside the walls, the night sky keeps its own steady pace. Stars move without hurry. Clouds drift. Snow may fall in a slow hush, building a soft weight on ledges and rooftops. Or the air may be clear and sharp, the kind that makes the world glitter in moonlight, turning every edge into silver. On such a night, the castle's outlines are dark against pale ground, and smoke from chimneys rises straight up before it thins, a quiet column that joins the sky. After the waking interval, sleep comes again. It does not have to be forced. It arrives naturally, as if the body has completed a necessary task and can now release itself. The fire has been checked. The blankets have been pulled close. The mind has spoken its small prayers, its small thoughts, and now it lets go. The second sleep sometimes feels deeper, sometimes lighter, but often more settled. In this second sleep, dreams can be stranger and more fluid. In that second sleep, the mind sometimes wanders into places that feel very old, as if it is walking through the castle's own memory. A dream might place you in a corridor you have never seen, yet it feels familiar because it smells of the same smoke and stone. A dream might return you to the warmth of summer hay, even while your body lies under wool in a winter room. The mind borrows whatever it needs. It stitches the sound of wind into the picture of waves. It stitches the faint drip of melting frost into the memory of rain on leaves. It makes meaning quietly, with no effort. There is also a kind of empty dreaming, gentle and pale. In that kind of sleep, you do not travel anywhere. You simply float, held by the rhythm of breath. You might be aware of the blanket's weight, the way it presses with steady comfort. You might sense the warmth of another person nearby, a small island of heat. You might hear the fire in the hearth, as if it is far away, though it is only a few steps from your pallet. In this floating sleep, time feels thick, like honey, moving slowly and never trying to hurry you. The castle's winter air adds its own small details. When someone exhales near a gap in bed curtains, a faint, cool current answers, and the skin notices. When the embers dim, the room cools a fraction, and a sleeper pulls the blanket higher without fully waking. When a guard's boots pass in a corridor, the vibration reaches the floor and becomes a soft tremor. When snow slides from a roof edge, it makes a muted thump in the courtyard that may enter a dream as the closing of a door. Even animals keep their night rhythm. A dog sighs and changes position. A cat, hunting in darkness, pads through a passage with silent feet. In the stable, a horse stamps once, then stands still again, its breath a steady fog in the dim. These sounds are not sharp. They are threads in the castle's nightly weave. And the waking interval, when it comes, does not feel like failure to sleep. It feels as if the night has two chambers, like the castle itself. First, sleep is one room, then wakefulness is a corridor, and second sleep is another room beyond it. People accept this pattern. They do not stare at the dark and panic because they are awake. They may even feel a quiet usefulness in it, a chance to tend the fire, to drink, to pray, to check that a child is covered, to listen for any sound that does not belong. As morning approaches, the earliest workers begin their tasks while the rest of the household is still wrapped in second sleep. In the kitchen, someone lifts ash with a wooden scoop and finds deeper coals beneath. A thin tongue of flame appears, then another. A pot is set on a trivet. Water warms slowly, reluctant to move from cold to heat. Bread dough, started the night before, is checked by touch, and if it has risen, it is punched down gently and shaped. The smell that rises from this work is small at first, then steadier. Warm grain, steam, smoke. In chambers, the first waking is rarely eager. A person does not leap from bed. The body negotiates. It listens to the cold beyond the curtains and measures whether it must face it yet. Fingers move first, flexing under wool. Then, a shoulder shifts. Breath deepens. The mind returns, slow and quiet, like a candle being lit. If the fire is still alive, its dim glow can be seen through a gap in fabric, a soft red that feels almost friendly. Dressing is careful in winter. Linen is put on first, cool against the skin. Then wool layers follow, each one adding a little protection. Hose are pulled up while sitting on the edge of the bed, because standing too long on stone makes the feet ache. A cap is tied. A cloak is lifted onto shoulders. Even with all this, the first step into the room can feel like stepping into a stream. The air bites. The breath becomes visible for an instant, then disappears. There may be washing, but it is minimal. Cold water is not invited against skin unless it must be. A cloth is dipped and wrung, then used quickly on face and hands. Hair is smoothed. A belt is fastened. Small pains are ignored, because winter teaches the art of ignoring. And then the person moves toward the hearth, toward the kitchen, toward the day that must begin, carrying the last warmth of the bed inside the clothes. Through it all, the castle remains the same patient presence. It holds the cold in its walls. It holds yesterday's smoke in its beams. It holds footsteps in its stairstones. It watches people adapt without complaint, shifting their lives into smaller spaces, splitting their sleep into two gentle halves, finding a rhythm that fits the season. The first voices are still low, and the day begins as softly as the night ended. A door opens, then closes. A kettle murmurs. Somewhere, a broom moves across stone. The castle does not rush anyone. It offers the same slow winter lesson again. Take what warmth exists, keep it close, and let time pass with gentle steadiness. In that beginning, cold air feels less sharp, because it is expected always in winter. Part 7 invites us to notice how winter is not only cold, but also a season of choosing where to live inside the same walls. A castle is a vast shell. In summer, the household may spread through it like light, using many chambers, opening shutters wide, letting breezes pass along corridors. In deep winter, the castle becomes something else. It becomes a map of warmer islands separated by cold seas. The household learns, over years and generations, that there is no virtue in heating empty stone. Firewood is labor. Charcoal is cost. A servant's waking hour is also a cost. So warmth is concentrated, and the castle is partly surrendered to its own winter nature. The choice begins in late autumn, sometimes with the first frost that makes grass look dusted with salt. A steward looks at stores of wood. A mistress checks the condition of tapestries and bed curtains. A cook considers how long the kitchen hearth must burn each day. Quiet decisions are made, not announced as a grand plan, but carried out as routine. A summer chamber may be closed. A window may be shuttered and left that way for months. Furniture may be covered with cloth to protect it from damp. A chest of linens may be moved nearer the rooms that will still be used. If you walk with a servant through such a castle, you notice the change. In some corridors, the air feels untouched by human breath, as if no one has been there for days. The cold is clean and hard. In a corner, frost forms in delicate crystals along mortar lines. A puddle where snow was tracked in has become a shallow sheet of ice. The servant's lantern makes the ice shine like glass. The sound of footsteps is louder in these abandoned areas because there are fewer voices to soften the echo. Then you turn a corner and step into an occupied room, and the difference is immediate. Not warm, not comfortable in a modern way, but altered. Smoke has a presence. Wool and leather carry their familiar scents. Bodies have warmed the air slightly. The fire, even when modest, creates a sense of focus. People gather close. They sit nearer to one another. In winter, distance can feel wasteful. Many households choose a winter chamber. This chamber might be smaller, with a lower ceiling, and closer to the kitchen. It might be set against interior walls rather than outer ones, so less stone directly faces the wind. It might share a wall with another occupied room, so two lives touch each other through masonry in the smallest way. A slight reduction in cold. The household does not speak of insulation, but it understands adjacency. Where people live, there is heat. Where there is heat, it is easier to keep a fire alive without feeding it constantly. Sometimes, animals are part of this winter strategy. Horses may remain in stables, yet their warmth rises into rooms above. In some places, livestock are kept in ground-level spaces when weather is severe, and the smell is tolerated because warmth is precious. The earth itself offers steadier temperature. A partially underground storeroom does not freeze as quickly as an upper tower chamber. When humans sleep above such spaces, the floor feels slightly less cruel underfoot. In the winter chamber, fabric multiplies. A bare stone bench gains cushions. A floor gains rugs. Even if the rugs are worn thin, a doorway gains an extra hanging. A heavy wool cloth that can be lifted aside for passage but falls back into place, reducing drafts. The edges of shutters are packed again with cloth. A tapestry is hung not because it is beautiful, but because it holds a layer of air still. And the household changes its habits, too. Work is drawn inward. Even conversation shifts. People speak more softly, as if loud voices would push warmth away. They do not linger in corridors. They move quickly between rooms, closing doors behind them, treating each door like a small wall that can keep one pocket of air separate from another. There is also the movement of beds. A bed that once stood near a window for summer breeze is shifted away. It is placed against an inner wall. It is turned so that the opening of its curtains faces away from the draft. The step stool is moved with it. The chest holding blankets is placed closer to the hearth. Clothing for the morning is laid near embers, so it will not feel like ice when touched at dawn. In the hall, where many still sleep, a screen may be raised. A wooden partition or a heavy hanging divides a vast room into smaller spaces. The goal is not privacy, but containment. A smaller space can feel less exposed. People sleep closer together behind the screen, and the air there, full of breath and wool, becomes a little softer than the open volume of the hall. It is worth pausing on the idea of softness. In a stone castle, winter is hard, stone is hard, cold is hard, but humans respond by making softness where they can. Wool, straw, feather, fur, even the sound of fabric moving is soft. Even the habit of steady routine becomes a softness in the mind, a promise that the night will follow known steps and therefore can be endured. During the day, the winter chamber holds a different kind of life. Light is limited. A small window, shuttered often, lets in a pale wash that makes dust visible in the air. The fire gives the strongest color, orange and gold. Shadows are deep and calm. A person working by the hearth can feel warmth on the face, while the back remains cool. Hands are held near coals before a task. A needle is threaded slowly, fingers stiff at first, then more able. Bread is broken. Ale is warmed if there is enough fuel. Care is taken with fuel, because winter teaches carefulness. At night, the chamber becomes even more concentrated. The hearth is fed with the wood chosen to last. The hanging at the door is pulled into place. The shutters are closed. The bed curtains are drawn, and within those curtains, warmth gathers again, in a space no larger than a few bodies. This is how the household survives the months. Not by defeating cold, but by narrowing life into manageable rooms, by choosing which spaces to occupy and which to abandon, by accepting that a castle is too large to be warm everywhere. The stone remains cold. The wind still presses against shutters. Snow still piles in courtyards. Yet inside the occupied rooms, a small human climate persists. And this is a gentle lesson for us, too. Warmth is not always a wide thing. Sometimes it is a narrow corridor of comfort, carefully maintained. Sometimes it is a curtain drawn, a log placed, a cloth stuffed into a crack. Sometimes it is simply people choosing to sit closer, to speak more quietly, to let routine carry them through the longest season. As winter deepens, time becomes marked by small signs. A log pile grows shorter. A tapestry edge gathers more frost at night and must be brushed in morning. A child grows used to wearing a cap, even indoors. A servant learns the exact weight of a bucket by sound and balance. The household becomes more skilled at winter, not in pride, but in steady practice. Imagine the day the winter chamber is chosen. It is not a ceremony, but you can feel it like a change in the air. Servants carry folded tapestries along passages that smell of damp stone. The wool is heavy on their arms. When it brushes their cheeks, it leaves a faint warmth, as if the cloth remembers the bodies that once sat beside it. They climb a spiral stair, each step worn slightly hollow by feet over decades. Their breath makes small clouds that drift upward into the stairwell and vanish. In an abandoned summer room, a shutter is pulled closed for the last time before spring. The iron latch clicks. The sound travels across the empty chamber and comes back as a soft echo. The servant pauses a moment, because silence can be loud in a room with no fire. The window frame does not fit tightly. Even closed, it lets a thin whisper of air pass through. A scrap of cloth is pushed into the gap with a wooden spoon. It is a small gesture, patient and repetitive, the kind that makes winter livable. Beds are moved. The bed frame creaks, not from complaint, but from age. Straw is added to a pallet, shaken loose so it holds air between stalks. A mattress is beaten gently with the flat of a hand to lift and redistribute what has settled. The sound is dull, like tapping a wrapped drum. Feathers shift inside their casing with a faint rustle. Linen sheets are aired near the hearth until they lose the bite of cold. They will still feel cool at first touch, but less sharp. There are smells that belong to this work. The dry sweetness of straw, the faint animal scent of wool, softened by time, smoke that clings to everything, to hair, to hands, to the very grain of wood. Sometimes an herb is tucked into a folded cloth, lavender if it can be spared, or a little wormwood, not for luxury, but for the simple hope of discouraging insects. Winter is not only cold, it is also long, and a long season invites small troubles. In the winter chamber, a servant arranges a screen to block drafts from a door. When the cloth is hung, it falls in heavy folds. The folds create still pockets of air. A person standing behind the cloth can feel that the air there is slightly calmer, less moved by the restless breathing of the castle. Even the sound changes. Voices on the far side are muffled, as if spoken through thick wool. And then there is the simple habit of gathering. In summer, people might sit apart, each with their own space. In winter, distance feels like an unnecessary expense. A bench draws three bodies close. A stool is placed near a chair so an older person can sit nearer the heat. A child curls on the floor beside a dog, both of them watching the fire as if it were a story told in orange light. The dog sighs. The child listens, and the quiet becomes a kind of comfort. The winter chamber also changes what can be heard. In a larger room, sound disappears into the high ceiling. Here, sound stays close. The crackle of a log is intimate. The scrape of an iron poker is clear. A kettle, if one is set at the edge of coals, gives a small ticking sound as it warms, like tiny stones shifting. Outside, wind presses against the shutters and then releases them. The release is a low sigh. Sometimes, the wind finds a narrow gap, and it makes a thin note, almost like a reed pipe, steady for a few seconds, then gone. When night comes, the castle does not go silent all at once. It lowers its voice in stages. The kitchen settles, though embers remain. The hall dims. A few servants still cross corridors, their lamps making moving circles on stone. The light slides over tapestries and makes the woven threads appear to move, because the mind in low light is ready to imagine motion. A servant carrying wood moves carefully, so the logs do not knock together. They know the sound of a falling log can wake a room. In the winter chamber, the last tasks are done with a slow attention. A cloak is hung where it can be reached quickly. A pair of shoes is placed beside the bed, turned the right way, so feet can find them in darkness. A chamber pot is set where it will not be kicked. A small basin is covered with a cloth so dust and ash do not settle on the water. The fire is fed, not with eagerness, but with moderation. A log that will burn slowly and steady, giving a long, low warmth rather than a bright blaze that wastes fuel. Then the bed becomes the center of the room, as it always does in winter. Curtains are drawn. The person inside feels the first chill of linen, the cool weight of blankets, and then the slow change as the body begins to warm what surrounds it. Outside the curtains, the room is still. Inside, breath becomes a quiet rhythm. The body, dressed in layers, settles. The mind follows. This is the season when many people sleep in two portions, first sleep and second sleep, because the darkness lasts so long. In the middle of the night, between those sleeps, a person may wake and listen. In a winter chamber, the sounds are small. A coal shifts and makes a faint crack. A draft moves the hanging at the door. A distant footstep echoes once, then fades. The person does not rise with urgency. There is time. The night is wide. A moment later, the curtain falls back into place. The hearth sighs, the coals settle, and the chosen room holds you gently, a small human warmth against endless stone. It is enough. So be. Part 8 carries us toward the slow return of morning, and toward the quiet understanding that winter always ends, even when it feels endless. In the last hours before dawn, the castle reaches its deepest cold. The fires have been low for a long time. The stone has given away what little warmth it borrowed during the day. Outside, the air is still, or perhaps it moves in a thin, patient wind that slides along battlements and over roof tiles. Inside, the cold is not dramatic. It is steady. It rests in the corners, in the seams of doors, in the shadowed pockets behind tapestries. It seems to wait. In a curtained bed, the sleeper wakes for a moment. The bed has become a small climate. Breath has warmed the air inside the curtains. The blankets have taken on a gentle heat. Stored in wool and fur and feather, the body feels safe there, as if the world has been reduced to a narrow circle of comfort. Yet even here, a hint of chill reaches the feet or the edge of a cheek when the person shifts. It is a quiet reminder that the castle around the bed is vast and cold. Somewhere beyond the curtain, a servant rises. The movement is careful, practiced. The servant's feet find the floor, and the floor answers with cold that climbs quickly through leather soles. The servant draws a cloak close, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a simple habit. The hearth is approached. An iron poker scrapes softly against stone. Ash is moved aside. A dull red glow is revealed, small, like the eye of a sleeping animal. The servant blows gently, and the glow brightens. A thin flame appears, then steadies. This is not a scene of urgency. It is a scene of routine. The servant adds kindling, then a log chosen for slow burning. The log catches gradually. The crackle is quiet at first, then steadier. Smoke rises and follows the path it has followed for months, up the chimney if the draft is kind, or into the room in a faint haze if the air outside presses down. The smell of smoke becomes part of morning, a familiar thread woven into hair and cloth. As the fire grows, it does not conquer the room. It only changes it slightly. The nearest air warms. A small zone of comfort forms around the hearth. The stone walls remain cold. The tapestries hang still, and where their edges touch the chill of the wall, moisture has collected and frozen in the night. When the fire's warmth reaches them, it does not melt the frost at once. It simply makes the crystals sparkle. When the shutters are opened, if they are opened, light enters like a reluctant guest. Winter light is pale. It carries little warmth. It slides across the floor and shows what the night has done. Breath in the air becomes visible. Each exhale a soft cloud that fades. Metal on the hearth tools is cold enough to sting bare skin. Water in a pitcher has a thin skin of ice unless it was kept close to the coals. Even then, the water is shockingly cold to drink, and the first swallow feels like a clear stone dropping inward. The bed curtains, when drawn back, reveal their own story. The inner fabric is damp where breath has gathered. Along the edges, nearest the colder parts of the room, the dampness has become stiff. The servant pulls the curtain and hears a faint crackle as ice releases. The sleeper blinks, not into bright sun, but into gray morning. The warmth inside the bed feels suddenly precious, and leaving it takes a small act of will. Feet search for shoes. Hands search for a cloak. The first standing moment is always the hardest. Cold air touches the skin that was sheltered. The body tightens. The mind, still soft with sleep, becomes briefly sharp. Then the person moves toward the hearth, because that is what everyone does. The hearth is the morning's center. It is where the day begins, even in a castle. In the great hall, the same change happens on a larger scale. Pallets are unrolled and then rolled again. Straw is shaken out and gathered. Benches are cleared. The central hearth is coaxed back from coals into flame. The hall fills with the sound of waking, not sudden, but gradual. A cough here, a quiet voice there, the scrape of a shoe on stone. Children wake and complain softly, then accept, because this is the rhythm they know. A dog stretches and yawns, then settles again closer to heat. Food becomes a kind of warmth that can be carried. Porridge steamed from a pot is not only nourishment, it is a small fire in the stomach. Bread, dense and plain, holds energy. Ale, even if weak, is warm enough to make the hands feel less stiff as the cup is held. In winter, the first meal is less about pleasure and more about readiness. A body fed is a body that can endure the cold corridors and the tasks of the day. The castle, through all this, remains what it is. Its strength is stone. Its weakness is also stone. The thick walls protect against danger, but they remember cold. People accept this without bitterness. They have never known a different world. There is no expectation that winter should be easy. There is only the knowledge that winter must be managed. That management is a web of small actions: banking a fire, hanging cloth, wearing a cap indoors, sleeping together, choosing a winter chamber, storing wood where it will stay dry, moving a bed away from drafts. Each action alone seems minor. Together they become the difference between restless misery and tolerable sleep. There is also the quiet adaptation of the body. A child raised in such a place learns early that cold is normal. Skin toughens. Fingers learn to move with less warmth. The mind becomes less surprised by discomfort. It does not mean that cold is liked. It means that cold is familiar, and familiarity is a kind of calm. Adults carry this calm as they move through winter days. They know where the warm spots are, where the drafts creep, which corridor bites the hardest, which stairwell steals breath. Knowledge becomes comfort. Time, in winter, is also shaped by festivals and small milestones: a prayer said at dusk, a candle saved rather than burned, a feast day that breaks the long stretch of dark weeks. People mark the calendar not only with numbers, but with ceremonies that remind them that the season is moving. Even the coldest month has an end, and the human mind needs to feel that end approaching. And then, slowly, it does. A morning comes when the frost on the courtyard stones looks thinner. A noon sun stays a little longer. A bird calls once, uncertain, and then is silent again. These are not grand signs, but they are noticed. The household does not speak of hope in loud voices. It simply feels a small loosening in the air. Winter has not gone, but it has begun, quietly, to release its grip. For now, though, we remain in the castle as it is. We let the day pass in its measured way, and we return again to evening, because the rhythm repeats. Shutters close, fires are fed. The household narrows into occupied rooms. Curtains are drawn. The night settles. The mind, following the steady pattern, can let go. In some corners of the castle, the cold becomes visible in a way that feels almost delicate. Along a window opening, where oiled cloth has been stretched tight, a thin lace of frost forms in the night. It is not thick ice, only a pale tracing, like a fine embroidery made by the air itself. When a lantern passes, the frost catches the light and disappears again into gray. On a stone sill, tiny crystals collect where breath has drifted while someone stood watching the courtyard. On the iron bands of a door, a faint whiteness appears, and when a hand touches the iron, it is like touching winter itself. The wind has its own language in these buildings. Sometimes it is a low pressure, a presence you feel more than hear, pressing against shutters so gently that the wood does not rattle. Sometimes it is a sharper gust that finds a gap and makes a thin whistle. The whistle can sound like a distant flute, or like a small animal calling once and then stopping. People learn to recognize these sounds. They know which sound means a shutter has loosened, and which sound is only the ordinary breath of weather moving past stone. Above, on the walls, a guard walks. Even if the household sleeps, the castle does not fully sleep. A patrol keeps the shape of safety. The guard's steps are careful on stone that may be slick with frost. The cold air on the wall is sharper than inside, because nothing blocks the wind. The guard pulls a cloak tight, feels the rough wool against the throat, and keeps moving. Breath comes out in white. A hand placed on the parapet feels the stone's chill instantly. The guard does not linger. The rhythm of walking is the guard's warmth. Inside again. In the winter chamber, the hours between first sleep and second sleep drift in a slow way. A person may wake and say a prayer under the breath, not loudly, not as a performance, but as a habit that fits naturally into the dark. Words learned in childhood return easily when the room is silent. The prayer might be for protection, for health, for the return of spring, or it might be no more than a simple thanks for the fire still living in the hearth. In a world where a flame can die and take comfort with it, gratitude is practical. Sometimes two people share the wakeful hour together. Their voices are low, and their words are small. They speak of ordinary things, a task for tomorrow, a child who coughed in the night, a bundle of wood that must be brought closer to the door. Their speech is not meant to excite, it is meant to settle. Then they fall quiet, and the quiet is not empty. It is filled with the sound of breath, the faint crackle of the fire, the distant sigh of wind at the shutters. If a child wakes frightened, a hand reaches out under the blankets, finds the child, and draws them closer. The child's hair smells faintly of smoke and wool. The child listens to the adult's breathing and slowly matches it. Fear fades into the simple comfort of rhythm. The child learns, night after night, that the dark is long but safe, that cold can be endured, that sleep returns. In poorer corners of the castle, where a servant sleeps on a pallet near a drafty door, the same night feels harsher. The pallet is thin. Straw shifts under weight. The floor steals warmth steadily. Yet even there is adaptation. The servant sleeps curled, knees drawn up, cloak wrapped close, head covered. The servant's breathing becomes shallow and steady, conserving warmth. When duty calls, the servant rises, tends a brazier or a hearth, then returns to the pallet and finds sleep again quickly, because exhaustion is also a teacher. Morning, when it comes, is not a bright opening, but a slow gray easing. Light enters first as a change in the darkness, not as a beam. The edges of furniture become visible. The tapestry pattern returns to the eye. The outline of a window becomes a pale rectangle. A rooster may call somewhere beyond the walls, or a stable hand may move in the yard, and the sound of a bucket against a well stone travels faintly inward. These are small signals that the world is waking. The household wakes in layers, just as it sleeps in layers. The first to move are those whose work must begin early. The kitchen servant rises, hands stiff at first, and feeds the hearth until the room smells strongly of smoke and warm grain. The stable hand checks animals, listening for the quiet shift of hooves, the soft breath of horses in the cold. The fire tender checks the coals, grateful when they still glow. Then, later, the rest of the household stirs. The Lord's chamber wakes. The hall wakes. Each waking is a quiet return. There is a moment in the morning when someone must face the cold water in a basin. The hand touches it, and the body flinches, not from fear, but from surprise. The water is so cold it feels thick. A splash on the face is bracing. It clears the last fog of sleep. The skin tingles afterward, and the person leans closer to the hearth to let warmth return. Hair is combed. Caps are adjusted. Clothing is layered again. Even though it never fully left the body, the day begins. The hours pass in quiet work, and then shorten again as winter light fades. Fires are banked, shutters closed, voices softened, and the castle returns to its measured night. You can let these images drift away now, like smoke thinning above a hearth. Keep only the steady rhythm of breath and the simple patience that carries any long season. Nothing needs solving, only rest now. Good night.